So the next session is on the knowledge gap between librarians and students, which is the name of our new white paper that published on Monday. It's the second in our Librarian Futures series. So discussing it today is Sam Sharman, who's a classical studies student, and Jamie Wood, who's a professor of history and education at University of Lincoln, with our own Matthew Weldon from Technology from Sage.
There we go. Oh, there we are. Time for a song. I'm not going to spend a lot of time today summarising the work that we did in the white paper. It is available now for download, so the QR code's up there. There should be a bit.ly link where you can download that for yourselves. But we'll just get right on, I think, with the questions. Hopefully everyone's got a mic. So yeah, thank you very, very much, both of you, for being here. I wanted to start off with something that appears right at the beginning of our new report. So we found that most students will use Google at some point during their research, and quite a lot of them as well will start with Google. They won't begin with the library for the research. Jamie, I wanted to start off by asking you, does that concern you? Is that something that plays on your mind? Would you prefer if students were starting with the library?
It doesn't surprise me, and it concerns me a little bit, I think. I think what I want students to be able to do is to use, to be able to find information that's useful for their studies, to be able to use it efficiently and effectively. Speaking to the mic, yes. To use it efficiently and effectively, and to sort of develop those transferable skills around doing that. And I think the library clearly has a really important role to play in that, and has traditionally had an important role to play in that. I also think that the library can play a vitally important role in training students in how to use Google effectively. So it's the two things aren't kind of in opposition to one another. In an ideal world, they would work together. So I think trying to integrate the library into, well, to make students aware of the library by doing things like signposting, to integrate the library into our teaching activities to some degree, ways in which we can expose the students to what the library has to offer. And I also think, training academics in how to do these things. So I think the library has a role not just in training students, but also in training academics. So when academics are undergoing induction or having their certificates in academic practice or whatever sort of training they have in pedagogy when they start, that's a place in which the library, I think, should be having a role, so that academics understand what the library can offer and understand the pedagogic role that the library can play in helping students to become become more information literate and better consumers of information and those sorts of things.
I think that's a great point, and I like that you mentioned it as well, because I think occasionally we forget this, and I'm guilty of it as well, that librarians aren't just there to train students, they're also there to train academics as well. And I think sometimes my focus can be on how do we engage with the students, but the academics are there as well. Sam, in your experience, are you more likely to start with Google?
So I have a bit of a confession to make. I generally start my research by going on Wikipedia, simply because it's a way for me to understand the key themes, and then from there, I don't just use Wikipedia for the entire essay, don't worry. I will then go to the library website or Google Scholar, or actually in the library, and with the key themes that have come up on Wikipedia, go through the indexes of texts, keyword searches on the library website. So yeah, I start with Google and then I sort of go down a more specific path.
And this is kind of a double-barreled question. Do you want the library to be more present in your research? And how would you want the library to be more present in your research, if so?
I think it's beneficial just because it saves me time when they're more present in my, they love using the word workflow. I love that word. When they're more present in my workflow, I get through my work quicker and I can find resources easier. So I don't really have any suggestions in terms of improving its current situation, because Lincoln uses Lean Library, and I started using that for the first time this year, and it's actually been quite good. So thanks, guys. Good team. But that solves a lot of the issues of trying to find text and making sure that like I actually have institutional access to it. So it's just like the small ways of adopting to like what students are already doing and incorporating that into your practice, as opposed to trying to get them to change their complete like approach to things. Yeah.
That's great, thank you very much. One of the other things that I wanted to kind of pick up on is this. We found essentially that very, very few students identify librarians as people they would go to for help with academic reading, which, again, to me, and I think to many people in the room, probably sounds quite counterintuitive, but when asked, very few sort of pointed to librarians as people they would go to for help with academic reading. I'm curious, Jamie, how do you encourage students to think about librarians as the go-to people for academic reading, or how do you help them make that first step to reach out to the librarians to do that?
I don't think librarians should beat themselves up about this, because academics aren't necessarily the students don't necessarily ask for help from anybody, and that's a real challenge more generally. So I think putting students in a mindset where it is okay to ask for help, I think, is really important. Making them aware, again, it's about that kind of how do you, I think the point that was made in one of the previous sessions around the library marketing its in a targeted way, marketing what it can do to students, I think is really important, and part of that I think is through academics, because that's really and modules and assessment and things like that are the key kind of pivot points that really validate things for students and make them see that there might be some value in it, and make them go and ask for some help for the first time and then realise actually there's a lot to be gained from this. So I think signposting, I think, again, as I've said before, integrating into modules, integrating it particularly, I think, into induction, but also not just ghettoising it in introductory courses that are kind of done within the first couple of weeks or the first semester of a degree, but integrating it through a degree, I think, is really important, so students can see that the library is there to help them all the way through. And also that it isn't there simply if they're having problems or like as a kind of remedial thing. It's something that can help them to get better, and it is there for strong students as well as students who might be struggling, I think is vitally important. I think like modelling is also important, showing them through what we do that we value the library by in various ways. I think again helps to validate it and make students see that this is something that's okay for them to do and can be helpful. I think also just more generally in relation to the report and what we're talking about now is that there isn't one student. There's a huge variety in the student body. So again, we need to think really about subcategories within that kind of generic student, that and think about how we can help those students who are struggling, are disengaged, right the way through to the students who are very engaged and like are thinking about postgraduate study or something like that. How can we kind of keep all of those students? So it's a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point as well. I think sometimes for me, the temptation for me when I was writing the report is I would go, we found that later year students actually, much more so than early year students, are confident with their academic reading, but they're not a block, that's not all later year students feel incredibly confident. There's still some of them who don't feel confident, so occasionally I had to remind myself, you can't generalise too much. You can't go, well, we don't need to worry about later year students, they've got it sorted, because it's never going to be 100% the case. Sam, just to pick up on, again, some of the stuff that Jamie has said there, in terms of confidence around academic reading and digital skills, is there anything that you can point to from your student experience that was particularly useful from the library in terms of increasing that, your confidence with academic reading? Is there stuff that you would like to see around that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
So we're quite lucky at Lincoln in terms that our subject librarian for classical studies actually teaches on our programme. and you can tell that she's a librarian based on how she models some of her seminars. So one of them we did, that's not a dig, it's really useful. One of the seminars was all centered around how to actually use Globe Online Classical Library and how to use certain databases with our subject in mind, and having that direct guidance on just simply how to actually use the databases that we have access to like maximize our research on our learning. It was extremely beneficial because I have saved so much time and had such an easier just like experience engaging with classical texts simply based on that one seminar and workshop that we had with Hope. So I'm quite a big fan of when librarians get like directly engaged with students. Just more workshops about, the services you actually have and how to use them, because I'm not going to use it if I'm not told about it, essentially.
I wondered if I could just ask on that. So that was a module or a part of the course that was specifically built into the. It wasn't an optional thing that you. Okay, so that's interesting as well. Because one of the things that we found when we were writing the report is that that there are a lot of extracurricular things offered, but many students aren't aware of them, and a lot of the ones that are aware of them still won't go. So it sounds like there's something to be said for having it be part of that core curriculum. I wanted, just before we start taking some questions from the audience, because I'm aware that we're kind of approaching the halfway point, we haven't mentioned ChatGPT yet, and it wouldn't be, as we've said, a 2023 session without talking about it. So I wanted to ask you both the same question on this one. In the age of, some people said in the age of disinformation and in the age of ChatGPT, is information literacy training more important than it's ever been? And where does the library fit into that picture? What can the library offer that perhaps no one else can in that picture? And is that something you think they should be looking more closely at? Because I know that everyone in the room will have very strong, possibly very different opinions on ChatGPT, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Shall I go first?
Yeah, you can go first.
I think the library, obviously, I think the library needs to be playing an important role in this around, for sure. I think the important thing from my perspective is meeting students where they are and what they are actually doing, what they're, as far as possible, that we can get a sense of what students' working practices are, rather than where we wish they were. And it does remind me, it's obviously a different technology to 15 years ago when I started teaching, and we used to give lectures which would have the Wikipedia logo on the slide with a kind of stop sign around it, about don't use Wikipedia, this is a kind of, that all the information's wrong and we can tell when you've done it, and you'll fail the assignment if you use it. And there's some kind of analogy there around actually over time we've realized this can be a useful technology tool, website, whatever we want to call it, and we can engage with it in lots of different ways through actually trying to improve Wikipedia, as Sam said, teaching students about how it's appropriate to use it and how it's inappropriate to use it. So, and I think that's all about students' digital and information literacy skills more generally. So it kind of ties it. I think it's a natural extension of thinking through some of these issues, and also, again, thinking, and also the key point to realise is that utterly failed. Students didn't not use Wikipedia. Students still use Wikipedia. So it was a failed attempt to prevent them to do it anyway. So it's just totally unrealistic, I think, to try and ban it. What we need to think about, as in one of the previous chats, was like where along a spectrum of kind of use is appropriate and inappropriate, and where do we need to be kind of helping students to think through how they can use it productively. And I think that's where the library has a big role to play, because you have our librarians have the expertise to think through some of these issues, whereas academics don't necessarily have that ability. They can also think on a kind of institutional level or a cross-disciplinary level, whereas I'm thinking in my historian silo generally. I'm not thinking about, well, what's the implication for these things across an institution, which I think is really important to think about. So I think the library has a super important role to play in encouraging people to think in a grown-up way about this. So my final point is the Wikipedia analogy was fundamentally dishonest, because I was using Wikipedia myself when I was putting it on slides, and I'm sure loads of other people were doing so. If we're using ChatGPT, there's something a bit off if we're telling students not, like, just kind of carte blanche not to use it at all. So I think it's a super difficult issue, and obviously there's all these ethical considerations to consider too. I think, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I mean, you see, it pretty much said like all of it, so thanks. But yeah, I think from a student perspective, ChatGPT gets used not to like cheat, but because it's a last resort. So there's been a lot of the time when like academics and stuff discuss ChatGPT, they always talk about like cheating, but you know, students aren't going to use that necessarily unless they're like really pressed for time, or they're in distress, or like actually need to like use it. Like most students I know, and as a student myself, we do like at least attempt to do the work ourselves first. So I guess just like embracing it would be better from my perspective, than sort of educating them on how to use it effectively, as opposed to outright banning it, because you're just going to have people using it anyway. So you might as well say, well, if you're going to use it, here's how to use it effectively and productively, and here's where you should really be drawing the line because of ethical considerations. So if you have more education on sort of how to actually use it, as opposed to, you know, don't use it, you're cheating, then it's going to be more productive for everybody, really.
I think just building on that, I think there's also a you know, we're as academics, we're really encouraged, rightly, you know, to think about what skills and dispositions and kind of awareness we're trying to cultivate in students that will be relevant to their future lives. And this is clearly going to be relevant to, you know, how you know, the products that we've been talking about today are going, you know, this is something that you're grappling with as you're developing these products too, and across a whole range of different disciplines and industries. Students are going to be going on to jobs where they need to understand how these things work. It's not just going to be relevant for computer scientists and people who work in sort of information science. It's going to be relevant for humanities graduates and social science graduates, and all across the whole spectrum of disciplines. And kind of closing that off isn't, again, I don't think is very productive. And I think we're doing the students a disservice to not have a discussion about it, at least.
I think just to pick up on that, there was when I worked as a learning tech, I had a colleague who before the days of ChatGPT, but I had a colleague who used to talk about plagiarism checkers, and he always made the point, and I thought I'd never heard anyone make it before he spoke to me about it. He said that whenever plagiarism is detected, you know, there's a huge effort to find out, has this person plagiarised? There's never really an effort, or we didn't see an effort to understand, well, if they have, why? Which is actually the more pertinent question, I think, in a lot of cases. So yeah, just on the point that both of you were talking about, you know, people are going to use it, and if they're using it to cheat, then we have to consider, well, why? You know, what's gone wrong that's made that seem like the best option? I wonder if we have any questions from the audience at this point? Yes, we have one. Oh, in the middle.
Is that working? Okay. It's a question for Sam, and it's just something that came up previously. I went to a seminar about 4 or 5 years ago about marketing to students, and what was the best way of getting across what the library had to offer and what they're most likely to listen to and react to. And there was a survey done which said that we assumed all students have social media and everything should be done on social media, whereas the majority of students back then actually prefer to get an email telling them about it. So, Sam, you and your fellow students, how would you want to hear about what we have to offer, and how are you most likely to react to it, or to, want to go to it?
I personally would prefer emails, because when I go on social media, I generally, I'm going on for fun, not to be informed or learning, really. Nobody spends 4 hours on TikTok trying to get an educational experience out of it. But emails to my university account, I definitely will see. First of all, there's no guarantee with how algorithms work nowadays. No matter how many posts you put out, students might not see them. An email I will definitely get. I will most likely actually read. And it just keeps it in that uni sphere, sort of mentally, of, okay, yeah, I can refer back to that email directly. I do like the social media posts from our uni library, simply because it makes it feel a little bit more human, so by all means, please continue that, because it is quite fun to see when they have workshops and stuff, and they're like, oh, here's a photo of the zines we've made. But definitely in terms of broader advertising, utilising university communications through emails is probably most effective.
Excellent, thank you very much. I'm not throwing it.
Hi, another one for Sam, sorry. I think it's probably a question a lot of us want the answer to, and perhaps we never actually go to get the answer. But in terms of learning about the databases that are available to you and using the university systems, at what point do you think that is best for the student to receive that kind of information?
Well, definitely not necessarily in the first week of uni. So Lincoln, I'm not meaning to dig on my own institution. They've done a lot of amazing things, but the onboarding in first year, you get info dumped with all the services, and it's just sort of a really fast blur. So you sort of forget a lot of the stuff you're told. But there are definitely points throughout my university career where they could have reinforced where the databases are and what to use. So in preparation for dissertations, they've had a couple of workshops in second year. It would have been really good if academics maybe brought the library services more in towards that, because obviously I'm going to be using these databases for my research. So, but just more consistently throughout the entire time that students at university, because simply saying, oh, well, they had a lecture on it in first year, they should remember it, is quite unrealistic. I think many of you probably realise that, but consistently and frequently throughout all of it, as opposed to just once and done.
Can I add an add-on question? Would you attend anything in the library if it was an optional, or do you tend to only attend things that are within the curriculum and within your course then?
So I'm what you probably categorise as a keen bean, so I do attend quite a few extra things. I know quite a few people who, I think the best parallel for me is there's a careers surface, which is also situated in the library building, and they do a lot of workshops on how to use LinkedIn, how to get a job, great stuff. Quite a few people go to those, and they're completely optional. You sign up through the careers service website to actually book onto those workshops. If the library made it more clear how to access those workshops and how to book onto them, I would go to more of them, and I think a lot more students would. By all means, you probably, if it was mandatory, you would get a lot more attendance, because nobody wants to get harassed that they've got low attendance at uni. But there definitely, I think, would be an uptake.
Okay, thank you.
I'd go at least.
That was really helpful, thank you. Oh, well.
Made that one easy, didn't it? I feel a little bit cheaty here, so I'm kind of asking the same two questions, but specifically to Jamie. So we understand that academics have these busy lives and have many, many marketing activities to get with, emails, etc. What does good marketing from a library look like for an academic member of staff? Would you expect to come to the library to learn about what we offer for our sessions, or would you expect the library to come to the faculty, and how would that look? How do we market well to you in terms of how we support students?
So, I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, I think I'll also say compared to many of my colleagues, I think, I'm self-rating myself, I think I am a keen bean in this regard. So I'm probably more likely to kind of, look into it for myself, or to kind of know something. I think it's similar to the students. I think then being clear about what you get out of it. So in a way, what Sam was just saying was like, if it's clear what the kind of its relevance is clear, or there's a clear kind of outcome in relation to the career service, for example, then you'll get more sign up than if it's something that's perhaps intrinsically worth doing, but there isn't necessarily that sort of like extrinsic reward. So I think that's an important thing. I think we get loads of emails, so it being targeted, in a. So I think like those ideas about kind of like newsletters or things that are relatively kind of snappy, but contain a lot of stuff you can get through quite quickly in them, I think is really important. I think that would be really useful. And I do think that point around getting involved in like training academics, like new academics, or people who are doing courses that accredit them to be able to teach. I think that's a place in which you can make a real, because also then you're getting at people before or at the point at which they're designing modules, which is when they might be more open to including sessions or doing co-teaching sessions with librarians than when they've already got the module or the course designed. So I think the more you can get in at like the design stage, I think is important too. So I think in many ways, like, staff are very similar to students. I mean, most of us stayed at university because we didn't want to leave. So thinking about similar sorts of like thinking process and motivations might be a good way of thinking about it.
Brilliant, thank you. I feel like I'm holding the bomb right now, so if anyone would like to take it off me?
Okay, so, well, I think we could probably ask questions for a long time yet, but unfortunately we've come to time, and it's time for lunchtime. So first of all, I'd like if we can thank Jamie and Sam. And before you go, I believe Amy and Kim.
Yes, Kim's backstage. The University of Lincoln has won a Library Teaching Learning Award. So before you're off stage, we need to grab you, Jamie and Sam. Jamie, for your work in the active online reading projects with Talis, which had a really phenomenal reception, and Sam as well for all the contributions to conferences. You've been to the US with me now, you've been to Birmingham. Where next? So thank you very much, both.
Can I just say one last thing? I mean, it was a bit odd for us speaking to you about the knowledge gap between librarians and students, and we didn't have a librarian here. That's because our university librarian and dean of student learning, or something like that, Ian Snowley, has not been very well, so he's sort of not able to travel at the moment. So he would have been here, and he's been super involved in a lot of this work too. So in his absence, I wanted to acknowledge that contribution too.